But anyway, okay, so let's get started. We had started chapter 30, and we had gotten as far as we had done verse 13. And if you recall, let's see, where, 1 second. I don't have like my usual desk and table. Anyway, so we talked about the fact that David encounters this Amalekite who had been a servant of these Philistines. Excuse me, an Egyptian who had been a servant of the Amalekites, and the Amalekites who had come and attacked Ziklag, who took all of the wives, children, and possessions, valuables, etc., of David and his camp while they were on their way to fight. And so we talked about the fact that they find this Egyptian who had been just left and abandoned, had eaten in 3 days, and we talked about how inhumane that was. And anyway, so we're going to continue on from there, but I wanted to just go back also a couple of things to note before we continue in chapter 30. So first of all, this whole attack of the Amalekites against Ziklag, okay, they don't anticipate that David is going to be there, because remember, David had left with Achish, the king of the Philistines, to go all the way to the north to battle against the Israelites under Saul. And what the Amalekites don't know is that when they get part of the way, if you recall, all of the princes of the Philistines went to the Achish and say, no, we don't trust David. You got to send him home. So they plan this whole attack. The Amalekites plan all this attack, not expecting David's going to come back as soon as they finish their attack. So that's also something to keep in mind. I think it's very interesting because at the end, David is, as we will see, David is going to be able to defeat the Amalekites, get the stuff back. And again, it's because the Amalekites really thought they had a lot more time on their side than they actually did. So there's something, I don't know, you could say serendipitous, you could say miraculous about the fact that David actually is thrown away. I mean, we talked initially about the fact how wonderful it was that David was spared from having to fight against Israel, which is something he didn't want to do in any case. So that was amazing savings. But I think here, after we see this whole story, we can also see that there's an additional miracle involved. Not just that God spared him from fighting the Israelites, but he also enabled him to come home in time to end up restoring the damage and defeating the Amalekites who had come after his people. Okay, now there's another thing I wanted to point out in verse 10. Okay, in verse 10, we talked about this already last week to some extent. I just wanted to point it out that they come and no, not verse 10. 1 second. 1 second. Verse 6, I think it is. Yeah. So verse 6. Oh goodness. No, I'm really sorry because I'm holding my phone and I am holding this by now I'm in the right place. I mean, I have to be able to see. That's the problem. Okay, verse 6. Okay, this is what happens when they first come back and they see what has happened, and of course they're all very, very upset. Verse 6 is as follows: David was in great danger, for the troops threatened to stone him, for all the troops were embittered on account of their sons and daughters. But David sought strength in the Lord his God. So we see here actually what has happened. This is a first crisis of leadership that David is encountering. He's not yet king, but everything we're reading about in these chapters are really, really building up to him becoming king. And he's been anointed, he's been appointed by God, but that's all kept secret and hasn't really gone into effect yet. But we're seeing here is really the setting forth of David's image and the David's character as a leader. So we see here on the one hand, all his men, and we remember that these men did not necessarily include the the most elite of society, to put it mildly. And so they immediately turn on him. They blame him for going up north to begin with the Philistines to join the battle, because what happens in the process is their families are kidnapped and their possessions are taken, and they're about to kill David. So he has this huge crisis on his hand. What is his response? His response is, David sought strength in the Lord his God. What a wonderful, wonderful foundation that we see him setting forth on his journey towards being king. And of course, this kind of pattern is something that we see going forward. Okay, so now let's go on, and let's start in verse. Let's see, where did we get to? Okay, so let's actually start. We had talked about this guy who hadn't been, so we can start really with verse 14, because we met this Egyptian, but we haven't really finished with the story there. Okay, so here we are. Okay, verse 14. We had raided the Negev so now basically what's happening, this Egyptian becomes a spy, in a sense. He now is going to tell David what happened to his family, because he had initially been with the Amalekites who had attacked them in Siklag. We had raided the Negev of the, I don't know, what is it called? The Kareti. Okay, it's a weird thing in English. I can't read it. And the Negev of Judah and the Negev of Caleb. We also burned down Siklag. Okay, what are we talking about here? We're talking about places in Judah. Okay. And David said to him, "Can you lead me down to that band?" He replied, "Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or deliver me into my master's hands, and I will lead you down to that band." And of course, that's fine. So he led him down, and there they were, scattered all over the ground, eating and drinking and making merry because of all the vast spoil that had taken from the land of the Philistines and from the land of Judah. And again, remember, they're not running away. They think they have plenty of time, because they think David is still engaged up north in that battle with the Philistines against Israel. Okay, but they're not. And so David comes upon them when they're, totally unawares. Okay, David attacked them from before dawn until the evening of the next day. None of them escaped except 400 young men who mounted camels and got away. David rescued everything the Amalekites had taken. David also rescued his 2 wives. Nothing of theirs was missing, young or old, sons or daughters, spoil, or anything else that had been carried off. David recovered everything. David took all the flocks and herds, which the troops drove ahead of the other livestock, and they declared, "This is David's spoil." So suddenly, remember now who they declared his men. Okay, so suddenly they're merry, loyal. They wanted to kill David a few hours earlier, and now they're very merry and happy and saying, "Hooray, look at what David has gotten. He's gotten us all back." Okay, now this next section is actually, I think, extremely interesting. Remember that on his way to the fight, to finding the Amalekites, okay, he came with 600 men. 200 of them were not able to go any further. And let's just remember what was going on earlier. Okay, so first of all, in verse 4, we learn David and the troops with him broke into tears until they had no strength left for weeping. Okay, they had come back from a very long journey. They had gone halfway across the country, turned back, came back, found all this terrible stuff, are absolutely in disaster, and they cry until they have no longer any strength. Okay, and right after that, they find this Egyptian who tells them where to go, and they start going. Okay, and where do we have? We see this in verse 9. Verse 9, it says that they went up until the Besor River, which I reminded you is the same as the Gaza River, which is such an important mark today between north and south of Gaza. Okay, and what happens is there are 200, if you see in verse 10, there are 200 men that say, they get to that Gaza River, they said, we can't go any further. Okay, and it seems, by the way, that it is when it's a big, deep, wide river, today is empty. But in times when it has rain, and in ancient times, these rivers would have much more water. It's a very difficult thing to cross. So it's not just I don't have any more energy to walk. It's I don't have any more energy to go across this very challenging way that they're going. So 400 of them are in great shape. 200 of them aren't. Okay, so here we go. Now in verse 21, we're meeting these same 200 again on the way back. Okay, when David reached the 200 men who were too faint to follow David and who had been left at the Besor River, they came out to welcome David and the troops with him. David came forward with the troops and greeted them. Okay, he's friendly with them. He's not angry with them. And in fact, the Hebrew says, he asked for peace. He said shalom. Okay, so it's not just he greeted them, but he uses the word shalom. He is coming to them with warm greetings and greetings of peace. What happens? Again, let's remember who these fellows are that are with David. Not always the finest fellows, okay? But all the men and churlish fellows, the mean and churlish fellows, these are the guys who are the problematic people amongst David's men. All the mean and churlish fellows among the men who had accompanied David spoke up. Since they did not accompany us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we seized, except that each may take his wife and children and go. Okay, you know what this reminds me of? Do you remember the story of Henny Penny? You know, Henny Penny, and I don't know if you know the story, but this is what I grew up on. Henny Penny, right? And she finds some wheat and she's going to make some bread, and she asked all the other animals in the barnyard, can you help me grind the wheat? No, they don't want to. So she grinds it herself. Can you help me sift the flour? No. And all these things, and ended up breaking bread. And at every stage of the way, she said, can you help me? And everybody said no. So at the end, she makes this delicious bread, and all the barnyard animals want to have the bread. And she says, well, you didn't help me thresh the wheat, and you didn't help me sift the flour, and you didn't help me bake the bread. So you're not going to be able to eat the bread. Okay. Well, that's a really nice little story to encourage your children to help. But these people are getting on the level of children, you know, when they're saying this to them. No, you weren't with us. You can't divide in the spoils. And then let's see what David says. And here we're going to learn something new about this whole thing. David, however, spoke up. And by the way, he says, each may take his wife and children and go, as if they are being gracious to these people and allowing them to have their wife and children back, which is really like ridiculous. Okay. David, however, spoke up. You must not do that, my brothers. Okay. Now, first of all, it's very interesting. On the one hand, he comes across with definitive leadership. Sorry, guys, you are not going to do this. On the other hand, he calls them my brothers because he does not want to alienate them. And his goal here, as a true leader should, even if you're dealing with people that you may not like or you think has done really problematic stuff, your goal is going to be to get them to do the right stuff, not to alienate them, not to create civil war. Okay. And so he does it at the same time. You must not do that, my brothers. Okay. In view of what the Lord has granted us. So first of all, he's making it very clear. What did these men say? They said, this is David's spoil. And what does David say? This is the Lord's spoil. This is what the Lord has granted us. So you don't have the right to decide who gets it. Okay. And then he goes us further, guarding us and delivering into our hands the band that attacked us. So let's first remember not only that the spoils belong to God, but it's thanks to God's providence, okay, that they have helped us. But there's another way. 1 second. Okay, and then they say further. One second. Okay, but then he goes as further. And who? 24. Where am I? I'm looking for. Okay. How? Okay, he says here. I'm having trouble with the Hebrew and the English here. Okay, so that's 23. 24 is And how could anyone agree with you in this matter? The share of those who remain with here's what's very important. So the first in 23 talks about God's role. It's not yours to divide, it's God's. And moreover, God has helped us. 24, how could anyone agree with you in this matter? The share of those who remain with the baggage shall be, or with the equipment, okay, I think is a better translation than baggage. The share of those who remain with the equipment shall be the same as the share of those who go down to battle. They shall share alike. Okay, so basically, first of all, we learn that actually when they tarried at that Besor River, the 200, and they said they couldn't go any further. From this verse, we learned that David said okay and gave them a job. They said okay, and they left their equipment, their baggage, their whatever they didn't need for the battle. Now, picture it this way. We know this from soldiers as well today, okay? Soldiers goes off to war. He has a huge backpack, okay? It's a kit bag, we call it, okay? What's in there? He's got a sleeping bag. He's got his soap and toothbrush. He's got his shaver. He's got his prayer book. He's got his Bible. At least that's what my sons have in their kit bags. Okay. You have a change of underwear. You have your change of uniform. You may have your coffee pot. You may have, you have all that stuff in your big, big, big bag. Okay. What do you need for battle? You need your helmet. You need your bulletproof vest. You need your gun. And in your bulletproof vest, there are pockets for your flashlight and for the scopes on your gun and for your extra clips, okay, of ammunition. You do not want to go into battle carrying that big, heavy bag on your back that has your sleeping bag or your tent or your pot or whatever, right? You want to just have to take your gun and your whatever. So what do they do with all that extra stuff? They are able to drop it at the Besor, and David says to them, now you guard this stuff, okay? So basically, we learn here that David not only said, okay, I understand you're too tired, you're not going to be able to fight this war very effectively, but David also gives them a job to do. And now what David is saying is their job was just as valuable as your job. If I translate that into modern military language, the people on the home front are just as important as the people on the battlefront, which I think is like this brilliant, brilliant understanding. Not everybody is cut out to be a warrior. Not everybody is a sharpshooter. Not everybody is a sniper, okay? But if everybody does their bit, everybody is considered to have participated. And therefore, what he is saying is that even those who are the home front shall be the same as the share of those who go down to battle. They shall share alike. And it's a beautiful concept, and a concept that in Israel we practice to this very day. Okay. So from that day on, it was made a fixed rule for Israel, continue to the present day. Okay. So continue to the present day is to this day when the book of Samuel was written, was in the time of David. But I can tell you that it even continues to the present day today. Okay. When David reached Ziklag, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah and to his friends, saying, this is a present for you from our spoil, the enemies of the Lord. He sent the spoil to the elders in Bethel. Now, this is not the Bethel that we know of that's north of Jerusalem, the Bethel that actually is the border between Benjamin and Ephraim. This is a different Bethel that I guess existed at that time in the Hebron Hills, because everybody that he's sending to here are communities in the Hebron Hills, south of Hebron. Sent the area of Judah, Ramoth Negev, Yatir. Yatir, by the way, is the name of a forest and of a community today in southwestern Judea. In Aroer, in Arer, in Shvamot, in Eshtamoa, in Rachel, in the cities of Yerachmeeli, and the cities of the Cani. Now, who are the Cani? The Kenites. Okay, we met the Kenites on a number of occasions, but the most recent time we met the Kenites was in the book of Judges. You may remember the battle of Deborah and Barak against Sisera, and Sisera ends up running away, and this is all taking place in the Galilee, of course, and he ends up at the tent of Yael, who's the wife of Hever, a Kenite, okay? And what we learn is that who are the Kenites? They are the family of Jethro. Okay. And they live in the south. Most of them are down near Hebron, but this group of them, the group of Hever, okay, split away and goes up to the north. And we learn that in the book of Judges. So here we have the original Kenites, which really are, for the most part, even though they're not part of Israel, they are allies and friends and live amongst Israel in Judea. Okay. And then more cities, to Hormah, Bor Ashan, Ba'atach, and to those in Hebron, and to all the places where David had gone and where his men had roamed. Okay, so first of all, remember David is part of the tribe of Judah, and not everyone in the tribe of Judah helped him out in his escape from Saul. We may remember that there were people in the Ziph desert who were actually turned against him and ran and told on him to Saul. But for the most part, he was able to stay in the area of Judah, and they were not trying to kill him the way Saul and his people were. And certainly, in any case, and again, we're talking about David preparing for becoming king. The place where you're going to solidify your leadership and your alliances are going to have to be your own tribe. So this is a way of sharing with them from the spoils. Now, is also something that many of the commentators say that a lot of the spoils here, it says here, he sent some of the spoil to the elders of Judah, saying, this is a present for you from our spoil of the enemies. Okay. But some people have interpreted this as saying that he actually found spoils that had been plundered by the Amalekites from the Judeans as well, and therefore he was able to return some of that to them. But for the most part, this is stuff that he is not keeping everything for himself, but sending it to the various things in Judea. Now, there's a fabulous story that I have to tell you here. You'll notice here, one of the communities mentioned is Eshtemoa, and the end of 28, Eshtemoa. Now, there is today an Arab village called Samoa, and it's considered to be the original, the name was preserved by the Arabs, that Samoa is the location of the original Eshtemoa, okay? This is the area south of Hebron. Okay, now a number of years ago, there was an archaeological dig and they found, first of all, it seemed the Arabs there, there's a tradition there that some of the Arabs who live there today are descendants of Jews who along the way at some point converted to Islam. And it seems for quite some time they retained their Jewish identity. They were a little bit separate from the rest of the village. Anyway, it seems that there was a synagogue, and an archaeologist dug there back in the 60s or the 70s, like shortly after the Six-Day War. An archaeologist went there and dug and discovered the remains of a synagogue. The synagogue is from the 5th century. I don't know if any of you have been in Susia, okay? Susia is a modern Jewish community located very near Eshtemoa, in the same area of the southern Hebron Hills. Today, it's the name of a modern Jewish community. It is located next door to an ancient community that was called Susia, okay? And that's another place that they dug. They found an ancient synagogue, etc. And that is a place that they dated from the 5th to the 9th or 10th centuries, okay? So this is from the same time. This synagogue, clearly this was an area, this was during Byzantine rule, and this was a time when it was actually very bad for Jews to be living in Jerusalem and in the Galilee, but the Jews had more liberty down in that area, and so you had a Jewish community down there, south of Hebron. Okay, not large, but it was there, and it seems that over time they just dispersed, or maybe persecution got the best of them, and they weren't able to stay there either. Okay, but it's just to say this was a time when we had Jewish communities in their area and there were synagogues. So they excavated the synagogue in Samoa, identified it with Eshtemoa, Under the synagogue, though, under the original floor of the synagogue, they found a clay pot. In the clay pot is remnants of what would have been silver, silver coins in this clay pot. Okay, and they found a few of these pots. I've actually seen one of these pots with my own eyes because it is located in the museum in Kiryat Arba. And if I've taken any of you to that museum, you would have seen this pot because it's something we always show. Okay, it's amazing. The pot itself, while the synagogue dates to the 5th century of the Common Era, this pot with the silver dates back to this time, to David's time. What do you think could be? Could this possibly be a pot of spoils from this very, attack on the Amalekites that David then sent to all the elders? And the Bible itself here says he also sent to the elders of Eshtamoa. Could it be that this was something that was there? And think about it for a second. Very shortly after they got these spoils, David becomes king. Isn't it possible that the community living there, the elders of Judah, lived in Eshtamoa, says, oh my God, we have in our hands a pocket of spoils of silver coins that we got from David, who's the king. We're not going to just spend these. We're going to put them in a very sacred place. And so it's very possible that the place where the 5th century synagogue was built on top of some kind of place that had holiness or special or sacredness, or some place that the Jews from ancient times actually put it away. And they would have buried this, or maybe it was just in some kind of a cupboard or some kind of a special place that over time got buried, and then the synagogue was built over it. But it's very possible that when they built the synagogue in the 5th century, this spot was already known as a special place. They may not even known why it was a special place. Okay? And there you have it. So we have this pot. We have this pot in our hands right now. Isn't that absolutely amazing? I just love that story. So, well, okay, back. So I just, I thought you would really, really like that. Okay, so we're almost done. Let's just finish this, finish the chapter. Okay, here we go. Oh, well, we actually finished the chapter. Okay, so now that we finished the chapter, I want to just make a few comments on some of the issues here. So first of all, what really has happened now, we talked about this before. We're dealing with two parallel stories that are going on at the same time. The story of David and the story of Saul. Okay. Now, the last we left Saul, he had that encounter with the woman of Endor, and he's then told that by the vision of Samuel, he's told that he's going to die the next day. Okay. And he goes off. All right. And then we flash back to David, and we find out that David went halfway up to the Jezreel Valley and has turned back, and then encounters this whole thing. So if you take a look at what's really happening, and I'm taking this from a teacher that I studied these chapters with, and I think he did a brilliant job. He lined up the events to see what was parallel with what, okay? So you will recall that David, it says in the verse of, one second. I don't know if he's still speaking. Okay, one second. I'm going to drop my phone a second. Okay, so it says in the verse, as soon as they find out, okay, what happened, it says here, where does it say? It says they went half the night. Let me just see where it was. Okay, so starting in verse 9, Okay, it says here, first of all, they arrived home, they found out what happened in Siklag, okay? Then they get themselves together and they go. And we learned that that he went in the morning. I'm just finding exact time, the exact verse that it says it. Here we go. Yes, verse 17. David attacked them from before dawn until the evening of the next day. So he actually arrived. Sorry about that. I knew I was going to drop the phone. Okay. So we actually arrived back, okay, at the battle site. He arrived at the encampment of the Amalekites just before dawn, which means that he was walking, or they were marching all night. Okay. What happened that same night? Saul consulted with the woman in Endor. Remember, that happened at night. So on the same night, David is running with his men in the direction of the Amalekites. And that same night, Saul is consulting with the woman at Endor. The woman at Endor says to Saul, "You're going to die the next day." What happens that next day? David is waging war. And again, that verse tells us he waged war from before dawn until the night. Okay. So that's the day that David is waging war against the Amalekites. And what happens in that war? He wins. That same day, which we haven't gotten to the rest of the story yet, but we will get to it. That same day, the Philistines are waging war against Saul and defeat the Israelites and kill Saul. Okay. Now, right before David goes out to battle, if you'll recall, he turns to Eviatar and he says, "Bring me the ephod, bring me the, Urim and Tumim." And he asks God, "Should I go chase after the Amalekites?" God answers him and says, "Yes, you should, and you will be victorious." Saul, before he consults, okay, we're talking the same night, the evening before the night, late at night, okay, Saul consults also and does not receive an answer. And it's because he doesn't receive an answer that he goes to look for the woman from Endor. Okay. Now, also one more thing, Saul, in chapter 28, verse 15, when he responds to to Samuel, he says, "What did you bring me up for?" And he says, I am in terrible distress. Okay. David, in chapter 30, verse 6, okay, we learn that he is in terrible distress, okay, when he finds out what happens. This would have happened that same night. And the same words, both of them are expressing terrible distress. Basically, what do we have here? Very, very parallel events, very similar events happening to David and Saul. David is on his way up. David is in terrible distress. God saves him. God gives him victory. God enables him. And we see what David is doing here. As he's on his way up to becoming king, David puts forward all the attributes of leadership and king and trust in God and everything. You see, you look at this man, you say, "Oh, that is going to be a king of Israel, a wonderful king of Israel." Saul, at the very same time, is going down and down and down. He's confused, God won't answer him. He goes to the woman of Endor, which he should not do. It's forbidden. It's a sin. The message he gets from there is that he's going to die the next day in battle and the people will be defeated. And that is exactly what happened. So I think it's just so interesting to see these two together. So we have completed chapter 30. Chapter 31 is the last chapter in 1 Samuel. Then we start 2 Samuel. Just one thing to let you know. The division between 1 and 2 Samuel is an artificial division. It is actually one book, and we will talk about that next week. But we will start next week with chapter 31. Any questions or comments, anybody? Nothing. Okay. It was great to see you all. Turn on your mics and say hi.
Hi.
Really.
Hi.
Whereabouts are you, Sondra?
I'm actually in Herzliya.
Right.
So you're perfectly safe in the
I was worried about you because I was thinking, oh, I hope she's in a safe place.
Yeah. No, we're in the center of the country. We're okay. Yeah. We're okay.
It looks like
Thank
you're
God.
in a tent. Are you in a tent?
No, I'm in my car.
Oh.
I'm in my car. It's just I have the light on in my car, but it's dark outside. So that's why you see the dark behind me. I'm in my car, and I started this at the beginning. For those of you who weren't there, I knew I wouldn't be back in time to do the class, so I brought my books with me. And I decided just do it in the car.
Thank
Here
you
I
for
am.
I've
thinking of
Well
us. Thank
I've-
you.
I've heard some
Yes.
of the Arabs have taken DNA tests and found out they had some Jewish genes.
Well, I don't know if they've taken DNA tests, but scientists have said that there's no question that Arabs here and Jews share a lot of DNA. Okay. So look, we were the people here, and we know that if all the people that were Israelites 2,000 years ago, or 2,500 years ago, David's time, 3,000 years ago, if they would have remained part of the Jewish people, we would be a lot more millions than we are today. So in addition to being killed over the years, there was assimilation, there was persecution, and we know with the Islamic conquest, there was forced conversion to Islam. And so it makes sense that, at least, look, the people living here at the time of the Islamic conquest were people, there were Romans, there were Greeks, there were Jews, there were Aramites, or all kinds, okay, that were here. And those who converted to Islam kind of got all mixed up with one another. So it makes sense. Doesn't make them Jewish, but it's very possible that some of their ancestors going way, 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 way back were Jewish. After all, Samoa today is an Arab village, and it was once Eshtemoa.
Yeah, Eshtemoa, I remember that.
That was a great story. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we'll see you next week, please, God. Be well.
Yeah.
Amen.